How's it going, everyone? I hope you're having a nice day. This is the long-awaited Zion Williamson throwback scouting report that was the top comment on my LaMelo Ball video. Let's get another 250 likes on this one, and I'll do the top comment again. We'll keep it rolling. And for this video, I want to focus on the defensive side of the ball for Zion, because we all know how dominant he has always been on the offensive end. But I think it's pretty crazy how poorly his defensive development has gone. So let's take a look back at the truly mean-spirited and nasty defender that Zion was. Longtime draft fans will remember this block where I don't even know, man. Look at where Zion is when DeAndre Hunter catches his ball. Like this. Yes, DeAndre Hunter was not the best shooter in the world, but like, oh my goodness, some of the range and ground, people might remember this one too. At least this one like sticks in my mind as well for just an absurd rotation. And it's not just the crazy hops and quick twitch movement explosion hang time, but also the instinct here, reading this pretty early. He's deep in the paint before this pass is even thrown. Shout out Matt Mooney. And he's able to be in perfect position to snag that. So that's not only the explosion and the athletic tools, but also really impressive on the mental side. But the mental side is going to be a big thing of what we talk about today, because it seems like that, along with some motor and of course like weight and conditioning stuff throughout his career, really have led to Zion being a much less impactful defender in the league than maybe he could have been. And it was a lot of stuff like this that maybe contributed, where Zion had some of the most ridiculous recovery blocks, but he is undoubtedly falling asleep here, right? For most players, this is a no-no. You can't get away with this kind of stuff. But for Zion, because he's the most explosive guy in the world, right, he can afford to sleep at the nail for a little bit because his explosion covered it. And he just hasn't been able to rely on it like that in the NBA. Even though to an extent he still can, but without being as like light and nimble as Zion looked when, oh my goodness, his ability to rotate and get up was truly special. As a weak side help roamer defender, like, he was absurd in college, coming out of absolutely nowhere to just swat shots and alter shit at the rim, like constantly making stuff happen. And this was another really nice read too. Zion is really early in the paint here. Shout out David Moretti, I believe. Is it David Moretti? I don't remember. But Zion is in the paint before Moretti even gets into the paint himself, right on the block to cut him off, rises up, and even though he jumps a little bit early, Zion's able to still get a hand on that block and help his teammate Javin DeLaurier block that himself. This one is just next. He's covering both sides of the rim at once here as Zion goes up to block the shot on the left side of the rim, and then this guard reverses to the right side, and Zion's able to block with his right hand despite swinging his left hand to start. What? How? This should not be possible. I don't really know how to explain how that happens, or I don't know. These were the kind of tools we were working with, and the motor and like the conditioning and the focus stuff just had to get a little bit better, and it kind of didn't. And on the ball, Zion had some great moments as well. Like, look how light his feet are moving here against Jarrett Culver, which, knowing what we know now, maybe was more of an indictment of Culver than anything. That's a guy who I should definitely do a video on. But Zion absolutely just annihilating Raekwon Gray here, as when he got low and in his stance, you could see how much space he could just cover on the ball, sliding without even great technique, which of course we will get into. But Zion's like movement and recovery tools, I think, could have made him a really good on-ball defender, and maybe still can at some point. But these kind of mental mistakes, the falling asleep, it was pretty rough. And oftentimes this will improve in prospects. Like, I feel like over the years I've learned not to value it as much as I once did, because so many, especially 18-year-olds, right, playing in college, get better at the defensive feel and focus and awareness and reading the game out. But Zion here has, again, falling asleep, but for most players against an NBA shooter in Corey Kispert, this is death. But for Zion, it's just, another Tuesday evening or whatever. But On the ball, for the most part, Zion was kind of a mess and still kind of is, as we'll get to. The technique was just not exactly sure what's going on. Instead of, sitting down and sliding, it looks like they're kind of playing maybe like a zone-ish, or it's just like everyone's very packed in. But Zion just going to turn his hips, not really even trying to contest there, and Kai Bowman's able to get by him super, super easily. And there were just so many plays like this where it looks like Zion is barely trying. And his change of direction skills were probably more concerning than myself and many others thought, because he really was and still is very clunky, like stopping on a dime and changing direction, which really hurts his ability to cover ground on the perimeter. Obviously, it's fine when he's just sprinting to the rim to block shots, but I do think that was an underrated kind of issue for him. Again, we see Zion I think a lot of this is just effort as well. Like, I'm sure Zion could have improved his footwork to the point where he's good enough here because of the freak athlete, motor, feel guy he was at times, but this is just not going to cut it, right? Really just not going to cut it. And these kind of habits simply haven't gone away. And that's kind of another lesson here, right? These development things and patterns aren't guaranteed and don't happen for everyone. And this is all just educated guessing, right? Zion here was pretty poor guarding screens, right? Doesn't try to attach to Luke May at all, gets blown by. Zion loves to turn and chase without really chasing. He just turns and goes shoulder to shoulder with the ball handler and tries to get a hand up to block, but ended up fouling more of the time than he did. And it was really not great. And you can just see his feet get so jumbled here. Zion looks like he almost is going to fall over here, tripping on himself. I don't really know exactly what is going on here. That's kind of how a lot of the Zion defense experience was in college. I don't really know what's going on here. Again, we see Zion kind of falling asleep, and he's lazy on the closeout. These closeouts were really problematic, and I value closeout defense and ground coverage a lot more now than I did back in 2019, largely because of stuff like this, right? How much of the NBA is predicated on movement and spacing and pace, and if you can't change directions, that's going to be a problem. So many plays where you think Zion could be making a play, right? Either diving to the rim here or guarding his man, but there's just standing in no man's land. That happened almost absurdly often at times. And even though there were moments of incredible playmaking and motor and effort, and Zion could just so effortlessly sky above the rim and alter these shots, it still felt like, even on some of these moments, Zion was only giving 75%. He could have been a lot earlier. And it's not a mental in terms of feel and recognition, right? We have seen Zion execute much tougher plays in terms of play recognition, where Zion early in the paint, right, against a pick and roll. There was another play in this Texas Tech game. He's early in the paint here, but this is not the one I was talking about. This one, right? Early in the paint. So we know Zion can map out the court. He can know which gaps there are to plug. He can do it. He has the mental, processing ability, but it just didn't always happen for whatever reason, right? But I do think there was some room, there was definitely hope for improvement, right? Because he was so young and so skilled and such an impressive player overall. And this is very, very common. A lot of really great athletes at a young age were pretty bad off-ball team, technique defenders. I remember Jaden McDaniels being constantly out of position, jumpy, not closing out really well. A contest there, and then Ant here is just going to get, swipe at the ball, reach again, get blown by. But he has become a pretty damn good defender. And obviously Jaden McDaniels, I didn't mean to pick two Timberwolves, but maybe, there's something to that Timberwolves defensive staff development. Really, really good stuff. But there was some legit, perimeter off-ball defense stuff from Zion, where he would dig at the nail and make life hell for drivers with his crazy, just explosive hands, and he could jump passing lanes and all that good stuff. But it's really remarkable. Zion with a robust 5.8 block rate and nearly 4 steal rate. Most of these guys were good defenders. Nerlens and Willie Cauley-Stein were not out of the league because they couldn't defend. Tare is a monstrous defender. Roberson, Ryan Dunn, all these guys that weren't in the league, Scotty Lewis, Jordan Bell, were monster defenders. But Zion just hasn't been that in the NBA, unfortunately, where it's kind of a lot of the same, as this is from this season where impact metrics probably like his defense more than I do, and he obviously like has gone way up and down in impact just because of the massive conditioning fluctuations. But yeah, it's a lot of standing around, not really sinking hard to make a rotation, and simultaneously not in the passing lane or kind of in any sort of position to close out to his man or to guard the perimeter. This is how it was all too often. Zion would occasionally gamble and make plays and get in the gaps pretty much and do all of his stuff, but on the ball, it's the same story as it was in college for the most part. There are moments which we'll get to, but just way too easily opening his hips. And it's these kind of like technique fixes that like it's year 5, 6, and you usually don't see 5, 6, 7-year veterans doing stuff like this, right? Where you're like immediately turning just the mirror with his shoulder, not resisting at all. It's not something you see, especially from players as good as Zion Williamson. So it's always just been more strange than anything to me. Again, Zion, I think, is going to end up contesting into a miss here, but overall he's kind of ball watching, and Jaime doesn't have to work very hard to get into that fairly open three by NBA standards. So there were moments throughout this last season, like especially post, around pre-post All-Star break, where he was a lot better, but overall, again, Zion really has always struggled to get through screens, just likes to kind of hop around instead of trying to get low and agile and take good paths, and that's gotten him burned ever since his days at Duke. That's kind of just always been an issue, and another thing that hasn't really progressed much since his time at college. And again, some of the awareness stuff, which isn't always bad. He definitely has better awareness, I think, than his ability to act on stuff at times, but just falls asleep for 1 second. Great cut by Barrett, great pass by Kelly Olynyk. And in the NBA, right, that's where the margins are. You have to be perfect. You have to be on time. And sorry about that. Again, we have some shoddy closeout defense, whether it's the tools, the motor, the movement, all of that has been consistent throughout Zion's career, made all the more frustrating by the moments that Zion locks in and moves his feet at the point of attack and walls guys off with his frame and does a ton of impressive stuff. And when he's guarding the weak side, and this would change so much for the Pelicans having a real weak side rim protector. And we had to start the video with Zion blocking DeAndre Hunter, and we are going to end the video with Zion blocking DeAndre Hunter. I just thought that was a nice little bookend there. Some things never change, but it would be really nice for the Pelicans if Zion could tap into this elite rim protection upside that we've seen in college. And I'm not ruling it out. Zion's not even 24 or 25 yet. He might be 24. He's still really, really young, and still with, a lucky year or two of health could really get into athletic form and then maybe improve on the defensive end. At this point, it seems unlikely that some of the major motor and effort concerns are going to improve. Like, I don't know. They've been here for so long. It doesn't seem like they're getting a lot better. So to an extent, that's kind of always going to be there. But it's really interesting because, again, development is weird and wacky, and it's crazy that a prospect like Zion Williamson, who was touted as one of the best prospects ever and has, been a top 2015 player, still has so much room to grow. And I think that's evidence of how good of a prospect Zion was, right? He hasn't even hit his full ceiling yet, and he's already like a borderline All-NBA guy. Zion is really special, and it was fun to dive back into his defense and look more into the good and the bad and thinking about translation. I don't think Zion will ever be a great defender, but I do think it's still possible that he turns it around a little bit. But let me know what you think.